Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sometimes dense source material and distill it into something genuinely useful.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Today, we're looking at a decision point in Haskell that seems tiny on the surface. We're talking 3 letters and a dot.
Yeah,
But the choice you make really defines the whole philosophy of your project.
it absolutely does. Our sources all center on this one prompt you get from Cabal in it, the Haskell build tool, right when you start an executable.
And it forces you to decide, right then and there, is this project about the code or is it about the story around the code?
That's the mission for today. We're going to decode the difference between Main.hs and Main.lhs.
And that .lhs one gets into a whole different way of thinking called literate programming.
Exactly. It's a choice between two completely different mental models for building software.
Okay, so set the stage for us. You run Cabal in it. You say you want an executable. What's that fork in the road? What does it ask you?
The tool asks a very direct question. What is the main module of the executable?
Simple enough.
And then it gives you 3 options. Option 1, main.hs. That's the default. Option 2 is main.lhs. And option 3 is other, specified.
And I imagine most people just hit enter for option 1.
Almost everyone, yeah.
Yeah.
Main.hs is the default for a reason.
So let's start there in familiar territory. Option 1, main.hs. If you've seen C or Java or almost anything, that .hs just screams code file.
It does. It's a standard code-first approach. It follows the convention that, pretty much all programming uses. The file is code unless you explicitly say it's not.
You mark out the comments.
Exactly. You mark out the comments.
Right.
With this choice, you're committing to a code-centric style.
Now, Haskell is pretty strict. It's not enough to just have a file named main.hs, is it? There are rules.
Oh, absolutely. If Cabal is going to build an executable from this file, there is one non-negotiable requirement.
Which is?
The file has to define and export a very specific function. It has to have the signature main.io.
Main.io.
Oh.
The famous entry point. Let's pause on that for a second. For anyone listening, why is that IO wrapper so important for an executable?
That IO is. It's Haskell's contract with the real world. Most Haskell code is pure, like a math function. Same input, always the same output, no side effects. But an executable has to do messy things. It has to print to the screen, read a file, talk to a database. Those are all side effects.
And the real world stuff.
Exactly. So by wrapping main in IO, Haskell basically says, okay, all the messy, impure, real-world interactions have to live inside this box. It contains the side effects, so the rest of your code can stay pure and predictable.
So it's a technical necessity for anything you actually want to run.
A complete necessity.
Okay, so with main.hs, the code is the default, and if we want to explain something, we use comments to tell the compiler to ignore it.
You got it. The source material is clear on this. Text is code. If you want to comment, you use a double dash for a single line or the blank for a block. It's clean, it's code first, it's what developers expect.
That's our baseline. Code is king, docs are the servant. But now, option 2, main.lhs. This is where it gets, I think, really fascinating.
It really is. The LHS extension stands for Literate Haskell Script, and the philosophy is completely flipped on its head.
So we're talking about literate programming.
We are. And it's not really a coding style, it's a documentation style. The focus is on the prose, the narrative, the explanation. The code is actually embedded inside the documentation.
But wait, if you just want really good documentation, can't you just write a ton of Haddock comments in a regular .hs file? Why go through the trouble of flipping everything around?
That's the million-dollar question, and is why LP isn't more common. The difference is subtle, but it's important. Haddock, it generates documentation from your code.
Right.
With literate programming, the documentation is the source. The runnable code is just one part of this larger document.
So when would that be the priority?
Think about academic papers, or maybe a textbook explaining a really complex algorithm. The goal isn't just to write code that works, but to produce a readable narrative that also happens to be executable.
The aha moment here, as the source points out, is for anyone who has used more modern interactive tools.
Yes, exactly. If you've ever used a Python Jupyter notebook, or maybe Elixir's Livebook, you already get the spirit of literate programming.
Where you have a markdown cell with text and then a code cell you can run.
That's the one. .lhs files are trying to do that same thing, but just with plain text. The narrative is the main artifact, and the code is just woven into it.
Okay, so how does that work mechanically? It's just a text file. How does the compiler know which part is my beautiful explanation and which part is the code it needs to compile?
The magic is a convention called bird style.
Bird style.
Yeah, named after the computer scientist Richard Byrd. And the rule is an absolute inversion of the @hs style.
Okay.
In a main.lhs file, any line you want the compiler to treat as code must start with a greater than symbol.
And everything else
Is a comment. By default, all the paragraphs, the white space, the explanations,
Yeah.
the compiler just ignores it completely.
Wow. Okay, so that's a total flip. In a .hs file, you mark the comments out. In a .lhs file, you have to mark the code in.
You have to explicitly opt your code into compilation, line by line.
That seems like it requires a lot of discipline.
It does, and it's a safety mechanism. If you forget on a line of code, it doesn't cause a compile error.
What happens?
It just becomes part of the documentation. It vanishes from your program. The compiler just sees it as more prose.
Let's make that concrete. The sources give an example. In a normal .hs file, you just have lines like module main, import mylib, and so on. What does the .lhs version look like?
Well, you might start with a paragraph explaining what the program does. No markers, just plain text. Then when you get to the code, you see the prefixes.
So you'd write.
You'd write module main, main where, maybe more explanation. Then import qualified mylib, some funk.
And the main function itself.
Same thing, main.io. Every single line that's part of the program needs that prefix. It forces the documentation to be the primary structure of the file.
Which means you can write whatever you want in the prose sections.
Yeah.
You could include diagrams, ASCII art, whatever, and never worry about breaking the build because nothing is code unless you say it is.
Precisely. It provides a really strong separation.
Okay, so we have code first with .hs and docs first with .hs. But Cabal offered a third path. Others specify. What's that about?
Option 3 is really about organization and clarity. It's less of a technical shift and more of a quality of life improvement for developers.
How so? The name Main.hs is pretty standard.
It is, but it's also very generic. Imagine you have a project with multiple executables. Maybe one is a web server and another is a command line tool for the database.
They can't both be Main.hs.
Well, they could be in different directories, but it gets confusing. Using option 3, you could name your files Server.hs and migrate it to DBHS.
Ah, I see. So it's purely for semantic clarity. It tells other developers and your future self what this executable actually does.
Exactly that. I worked on a project once where we had the main logic, but then separate entry points for benchmarking and for running tests. We call them bench.hs and tests.hs. It just makes the project structure immediately understandable.
So it's not a technical change like .lhs, it's just a better name.
Purely organizational.
Yeah.
But the key constraint is still there.
You still need the main function.
Absolutely. No matter what you call the file server.hs, tool.hs, whatever, it still has to contain that main.io function. You're just telling Cabal to look for that entry point in a different place.
So that little prompt at the beginning really does force you to think about communication from day one.
It really does. You're choosing a path. Path 1 is .hs, the code first standard.
Path 2, .lhs, is the documentation first literary approach using bird style.
And path 3 is the custom name for organizational clarity, but it still follows all the rules of a standard .hs file.
And your choice signals your priorities for the whole project.
It says a lot about who you think the audience for your code is. Is it for a machine to run, or is it for a human to read and understand first?
What's interesting is that the source material mentions this is from part 6 of a series on advanced Haskell, which suggests the context for this choice is often in complex, maybe academic or educational settings.
That makes sense.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to chew on. Given the extra work of putting a line around on every single line of code in an .lhs file, and knowing we have great tools like Haddock for documenting .hs files, what is the unique value that literate programming offers that justifies that friction?
That is the question, isn't it?
Think about something like formal verification or really rigorous peer review of an algorithm. Does that guaranteed syntactically enforced separation of prose and code in .lhs give you a level of trust that you just can't get with standard comments?
It's something to think about. The choice to use .lhs is definitely a deliberate one. It's never an accident. Maybe find a few projects that use it and see if the payoff is there.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.